entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. I teach it at FIU. I teach at the University of Miami. Once a year, I teach a course at MIT, and then I teach some other programs. And I just want to welcome you. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, obviously. The topic is supposed to be AI eating software. I don't know whether we'll get to that, but I think the panelists provide a diverse background that will stimulate your thinking. So Sheamus, be kind enough to introduce yourself and sort of explain how you ended up in this AI world, please. Sheamus? JT, do you hear anything?
I hear a lot of background static noise. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of background noise.
Okay, Bob.
That's coming from Toby, maybe? I don't know.
Any of the presents are not speaking, mute yourself. Sounds like someone's
that Sheamus is talking,
like
and for some reason
chips.
we're getting bad.
Okay, that's better. Bob, thanks for that introduction. I'm actually based out of Kendall Square, right across the street from MIT. I'm looking at the building right now. So as Bob said, my name is Sheamus McGovern. I am founder of a software development company based here in Boston called Startup Codeworks, and myself and my team primarily focus on building web apps and mobile apps for other startup companies doing interesting stuff. More relevantly, I also run a global conference called the Open Data Science Conference, or ODSC. They're pretty much a technical conference around the tools, technologies, and languages used in data science, or as the cool kids call it these days, AI. We do stuff in Tokyo, London, East Coast, West Coast, and what's interesting is different parts of the country, different parts of the globe, different industries have a whole different aspect on AI and data science, and what's going on there. East Coast is very much finance, healthcare, insurance, and again, I don't mean to leave anything out here. West Coast is very much driven by the unicorns, right, as you guys well know. So, yeah, that's basically been my what I'm doing in the AI and data science field to date. And how I got here, interesting story. I was a software engineer. Started working in finance, building out hedge fund models, trading models for financial firms and alternative asset firms here in the UK. And funny enough, a lot of our work was with very structured data, pricing data, model data. And it wasn't until about 6 years ago that I started my own startup in trying to price bonds in the bond market. And we started looking at lots of unstructured data. So, very quickly my, education in computer science and regular statistics didn't really fit that unstructured world. And I think that's a lot of what you have in AI now. You have this very unstructured data set. You're working with unstructured methods and all that good stuff. So that kind of led to my interest in AI and a lot of what I'm doing currently. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Sheamus, just one quick follow-up. I notice you don't use the expression predictive analytics.
No, it's a well-used expression. I'm afraid to even use the word data science now. It's like it's AI or cognitive computing, but I'm very agnostic when it comes to that stuff. I say everyone, each their own, whichever you do. But yeah, it's kind of gone a little bit out of style, but the models are still great. So good point.
Okay, thanks. JT, you're up, sir.
Hi, thank you, Bob. Jean Turgeon, but I think most people that know me well or reasonably well call me JT. I think it's easier to pronounce for a lot of folks. I'm the Vice President and Chief Technologist at Avaya. Obviously, the core of our business is around enabling business communication We do a lot of contact center, and the reason I'm here is obviously that technology is going through a massive transformation on how these digital channels will be consumed, and how AI, IoT, machine learning, deep learning play a key role in our transformation, the digitization of those services, and where does human-to-human communication play versus human to AI or AI to human, and so on. So, interesting topic for us as we play in the transformation, and something highly critical to us, to our success and growth moving forward. So, pleasure to be here with you guys.
And did your career start in telecom, or did your career start closer to AI?
My career started in 1982, closer to telecom, networking. I think I played every single possible role in any type of enterprise organization. Spent about 4 or 5 years in the service provider space as well, when carrier Ethernet became a de facto transport for a lot of the service providers out there. I did a lot of stuff in the cloud, of course, and everything that goes with that. So AI is something that, and everything that surrounds it, probably in the last 5 years or so.
So you basically participated in a good part of the digital revolution, if you will. Okay.
This is my third decade cycle, you know.
Yeah, I have one more decade on you. I could talk about video text if we get really bored. Toby, did you hook up yet?
Yes, I'm online. Yeah, no,
Toby, you're there?
Yes,
Barely.
I can hear you. Can you not hear me? Can you not hear me?
You're being stepped on or something.
There may be a lot of wind, Toby, where you are, or there's a lot of background noise when you speak, that's all.
Is that better?
That's better. So, Toby, what we'd like you to do is introduce yourself and sort of explain how you ended up in this AI space.
So I've spent my life dreaming about building machines that could think as an academic. I'm now a professor of artificial intelligence at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, but I've been a researcher in many other countries, in the UK, in Italy, Germany, and as you might have seen in the background of my video just now, I'm actually in Berlin today, dreaming about building machines that could think. And I've chaired the main AI conference in the area, and have just written a book actually for the general public, trying to explain where AI is and where it might go in the future. That's available at the end of this month. It's on pre-order at Amazon.
And did you start your academic career around artificial intelligence or somewhere else in, let's call it, computer science?
Well, I started so long ago, you couldn't study artificial intelligence, certainly as an undergraduate, so I had to study some other things. But as soon as I could start AI as first a master's and a PhD, I've only ever done AI. So I've been living the dream. It's quite an exciting time now because we seem to be making palpable progress, and everyone else is waking up to the idea that we might succeed.
I think there's quite a lot of people that think you might succeed. All right, well, that's a terrific introduction. Thank you. And Bob, you're our last panelist, so you get the quote-unquote final word on introductions, so go for it, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Bob Beachler. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Business Development for a neural networking company called BrainChip. And what we do is we are commercializing a type of neuromorphic computing called spiking neural networks. They're very good at recognizing patterns out of noise, and it's modeled on kind of how the human visual cortex works. I got involved in AI primarily due to my previous work. I had been for probably about 15 years working on vision applications for embedded processing. So things like video surveillance cameras, machine vision for inspection. And it was really the aha moment when AlexNet won the ImageNet challenge, that all of a sudden people said, hey, there might be something here with non-explicit programming to do the types of things that previously we couldn't do. being able to classify thousands of objects in almost real time and to have a decent accuracy for it. And so I had been at a previous startup that was doing video surveillance imaging and video analytics. I had sold that. I was with a large semiconductor company called Xilinx and worked on their embedded vision solutions and getting a interface for the machine learning flows like TensorFlow, Caffe, and all the ones that people are, the popular ones that people are using today, to place those newly created neural networks into a semiconductor device that you can then deploy in the edge. I joined BrainChip about 4 months ago because it kind of has a unique spin on how to do this type of neural network for, right now we're focused on imaging applications. We're deployed in civil defense and casinos for card recognition and chip recognition. But ultimately, our technology can be used in a multiplicity of different markets, and that's kind of the challenge and the excitement that I have, which is taking this technology to commercialize it in the field.
And does that involve selling to the government, or mostly just private sector?
In fact, one of our primary users is DGSI, which is actually the French Homeland Security in Paris, where we're used in their labs for doing things like pattern search in videos and for low resolution facial recognition.
Very nice, very nice. It sounds like our panelists have all been in the private sector for quite a long time, and many involved in AI for a good number of years. Sheamus, one of the questions that I circulated was this notion of, what's the most erroneous preconception that people have about AI, and maybe you could talk about that and what it implies for the future of AI. Sheamus? Sheamus?
Sorry, I had muted myself. Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry, I just
okay.
forgot to unmute.
Yeah, perfectly.
Conference call faux pas. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I think we could talk for the next hour just about that question alone. And I think it's quite a long list, and some of this is quite controversial as well. So obviously, Elon Musk and others out there talk about AI basically being a job killer. Whether that's the near future or far future, that's kind of to be decided. But my history as a technologist is that most certainly it's a job disruptor in terms of some jobs will go away, but a lot of panels I listen to, a lot of people I speak to, that AI is a net creator of jobs, for sure. You just look at driverless vehicles, what's going on there now, IoT, even look at what's happening in the banking industry. There's actually, I was reading something in the Wall Street Journal how over the last 10 years there have been more banking positions created in banking locations, despite the fact that I go across the street and it's an automated teller, but it's an in-camera one where I can speak to somebody. So I think that's one big one and a big debate. The other misconception I think is you got to be careful about, is this the third generation of AI? This time it's different. What's different about it? There's been huge advantages in deep neural nets, especially in terms of adding the number of hidden layers, and that's made a lot of progress. So AI is not just for doing machine vision on cats and dogs. But more to the point, I think a big misconception is that AI is this kind of hand-wavy thing. It's going to do all things for all people, but not to kind of get too technical here, but even machine vision. But aside from that, there's a lot of AI is data dependent, right? So there's still biases in data, there's still biases in models, and it's not this unsolvable technology because what the joke is, what's a data scientist? It's a 26-year-old coder who lives in San Francisco. So to be a data scientist and AI expert, to a certain degree, to build this stuff, you need to be a a very good software engineer and a very good scientist. But that's, those fundamentals are still there. It's like, how good is your data? Do you have the data? Are there biases in the data? How do you correct for those? How good are your models? Do you understand the strengths and weaknesses of your models? So I think that's a big one. And then the last one I would say is still this, what we like to call in the business is this human in the loop, right? Because a lot of, and again, I'm mixing terms here, but I don't want to get into what's data science versus AI versus what's machine learning. But just looking at machine learning, where you have supervised learning, where people are actually going out and training a model and saying, based on this set of data, here's what it's going to do. A lot of AI is just based on that. That's kind of a human loop concept. Another human loop concept is where you've already trained a model, but for that final buy-sell condition on a big trade or something like that, there may be other aspects of that. And AI kind of gets scary where you go to these conceptions where you go to these models where there is no human in the loop. So the classic example is the car is going to crash. Do I kill the passenger? Or do I kill the pedestrian? Kind of thing. So a lot of misconceptions around that in terms of how far AI is advancing and how quickly. And I'm definitely not an expert in that. And I think it'd be more like the 1990s where people kind of after a certain time, the reality wasn't keeping up with the hype. I think we're in a bit of that phase that we will see great advances over the next 5 and 10 years, but people have different expectations as to when those advances will happen. But a lot of things, like I said, data and modeling, there's still a lot of improvement has to go there, despite what we've seen with neural nets and deep learning. Sorry for a bit of a long-winded answer, but just a few thoughts on that.
You keep mentioning this notion about data cleaning and such. Do you think we're going to get to the point where the AI functionality can do its own cleaning?
Actually, you know what? I'm going to a talk in a couple of months where they're presenting on a software program that can write code. So I'm really excited to see that because if that can do anything, do it. And anyone who's listening, who's or watching, who's a data scientist, I know you're all promised that data science is the sexiest job of the 21st century, but a joke making the rounds now, it's not the sexiest job of the 21st century. It shouldn't be called. It should be called data janitor because you spend 70 to 90% of your time cleaning data rather than building models and all that stuff. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, right? I don't care if you're using an image recognition set, unstructured data, structured data, understanding the data you're working with and all that good stuff. The problem you have now is there's some fantastic tools out there. It doesn't matter if you're using IBM Watson or other kind of proprietary platforms, or you're using things like the deep learning framework from TensorFlow. When you go out there and you're learning this stuff and people give you kind of these clean data sets and they give you these awesome tools like TensorFlow and Kafka that you can use, you fall in this, you get into this false sense of security where, oh, I got this test data, I got this, these models I'm running, someone else built, and this stuff works great. I can tell a cat from a dog. And then your boss comes to you and says, okay, well, let's do anomaly detection with this, or let's do something else, and you're kind of scratching your head. So like we've made great leaps in the modeling and ImageNet for making data available and making tools available, but the hard work is still there.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Sheamus. JT, what's the biggest misconception that you see in AI that we haven't already talked about?
Oh, obviously, Sheamus touched on a lot of some of the key points. I know, obviously, the job killer, but I kind of go back to the days of. I remember very clearly my parents telling me, 35 years ago, it was like, well, what are the kids going to do? Automation was just in its early stages, right? So obviously, automation has continued to evolve. But the key is, I think people have to remember, automation often triggers innovation. So it's about going to the next step. It's about continuing to evolve, from both the technology and capabilities that the humans can deliver. So The thing that people always need to remember when they look at artificial intelligence and they start having the perception that it's going to kill everyone's job is that automation is good at simulating. Obviously, deep learning and all this stuff is coming to be much more powerful, but it's really, again, an enabler and an opportunity for people to continue to transform, improve their skill set. In the business that we're in, obviously we have to transform. There's less and less human communication. At the very least, you want to reduce it, but it's also an opportunity when you spin that around a different way for people to enhance their skills. So people that will be answering questions, people that will be answering phone calls, will be subject matter experts. So it's a great opportunity to become specialized, to become a great value to any of your organization, and let AI start. I hate the word replacing, but AI start to replicate a lot of the repetitive tasks that are not necessarily that exciting for humans to perform. So I think to me the big one is again, as Sheamus mentioned, it's not a job killer. It's a innovation enabler, and it's about kind of I don't want to say forcing, but allowing and enabling people to just enhance their capabilities to better serve whomever they serve out there and within their businesses. And one little thing I would say is that don't forget sundown for and not necessarily just look at Watson for AI, artificial intelligence. So.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point when you focus on the enabler side of AI. It doesn't get nearly as much press as the job loss, but I think it has actually much bigger potential. So thank you for bringing that up.
Everything has been so much on, again, reducing costs, right? And this is always kind of the first trigger that organizations will look at, right? If we can reduce costs enough, we'll reinvest. I think where we dilute the focus is we don't focus enough on the reinvestment, right? So organizations will save money in one bucket and reinvest in others. People have to figure out what that others is so that they maintain their skill set and obviously employment as well.
Agreed. Toby, what's your thought on the biggest misconception?
Well, there is definitely a lot of hype out there today, and I think we have to be concerned that there are still some fundamental obstacles. Some things that, for example, deep learning still can't do. Deep learning doesn't have a deep fundamental understanding of what it's doing. So if I say to you a sentence like, "He is pregnant," you will say, wait a second, there's something wrong with that sentence. A deep net will have no idea about that. It has no common sense. It has no deep understanding of the sentences it may be parsing, or that's one you can try and Google translation. It won't hiccup at all on something like that. Right. You also have some fundamental challenges in terms of guaranteeing behaviors. There's certain areas where we will, in security and safety critical systems, where we want guaranteed behaviors. Again, deep learning doesn't come with any guarantees. It's interesting to look at how they're building autonomous cars in Singapore today. The autonomous taxi they're trialing, the top layer is some fuzzy logic. So if it goes through a red light, they can say, well, why did it go through that red light? And was there a rule for that? And if there isn't a rule, they'll write another rule. So there'll be lots of places where we want those sorts of guarantees, where we won't trust the system unless we actually explicitly code the rules for ourselves. And the third is there's no explanation. There really are black boxes. And again, there's lots of settings where we'll want explanation. So there's still a lot of things that we need to crack, and it's not something that's coming along. As far as it comes to automating people's jobs, I think the panel's being a little too optimistic. We have no idea whether more jobs will be created as destroyed by technology. That's always been the case in the past. We have no idea going forwards whether that's always going to be the case. Certainly, if I was a taxi driver or a truck driver, I would say that my job is going to be automated. No one is going to pay you for driving anymore. That's clearly going to be the case in the next decade or at most 2 decades. Driving is not a skill that will be paid for. And it's easy for us to apply our values and think, well, we're educated people, so we'll easily find other things that we can do But if your only skill is driving a car or driving a truck, you're going to have to find a new skill. That's pretty sure. Whatever the new jobs are, they're going to require different skills to the jobs that we have today. And we have to work out a society where, despite the fact that most of us are going to be employed in some sort of gig economy, we get to be able to do that reskilling. We have the education to do that. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a painful transition. So there are going to be, like with all technologies, losers as well as winners. We may be the winners, but there'll be lots of people who are losers. So I think we have to be aware of that fact. And that the jobs that will be created will be jobs with completely different skills to the jobs that got destroyed.
Could be the case. I actually think that education and healthcare are going to become the big opportunities for jobs, probably for the people displaced by AI. But that's
there's also a limitless number of jobs
panel.
we could create in healthcare, in aged care, and in education. But to do that, we have to be able to work out how we pay for it. We could double the number of teachers employed today, halve class sizes. That would have amazing educational impact. We know that would be a great benefit to our society. But how are we going to pay for that? And that's a question we have to work out. Similarly with healthcare, we can spend limitless amounts of money employing people in healthcare. The question is, are we going to be able to pay for it?
Actually, I don't think you have the question framed right. I think we can pay for it. Its question is, can we change our value system so that we're willing to pay for it? But anyway, I suspect you and I could debate this for many hours. It'd be a good debate. Bob, you're last man up, so I hope you've had a chance to come up with some other thoughts on what's the biggest misconception in AI.
Yeah, I think that everybody touched on it to a certain degree.
You're in a tough spot.
The issue is that what 99% of the people are working on in AI is considered narrow AI, where I have a specific task that I'm trying to solve and I can't explicitly program it. Therefore, I need to train a machine learning system to be able to do it. And so we're definitely not going to get there in terms of general AI for a while. But even in the narrow AI space, one of the things that we're still missing is the ability to continuously learn. And what I mean by that is, right now you set up your machine learning system, you train it on a bunch of labeled supervised data, you then deploy that, it's now an inference engine and it's working. Now it encounters some unexpected data. It gives you a really bad result because it hasn't been trained on it before. You get that red flag, but now I go back and I retrain and I start from scratch. And what I mean I start from scratch is that I have to just add this new piece of data to my existing data set, and now I have to retrain the entire system. It's something that people call catastrophic forgetfulness. Think of as a child learns, it continues to additively learn on a daily basis. It's not that all of a sudden it sees an apple and it reverts back to not knowing any other shapes. But that's where we are today in terms of machine learning. So I think one of the misconceptions, one of the things that people are working on for sure, and in fact it's a DARPA project where they're doing a grant program to have continuously learning networks so that you don't have to start from scratch every time you encounter new data, and the machine itself will adapt to the new data and learn from that and autonomously learn. And we're just not there yet. But at some point we're going to have to get there in order to start seeing the real fulfillment of AI.
Yeah, isn't that also why people are experimenting with neural networks where they're using, I think it's called aggressive pattern recognition, where one part of the network is doing the analysis and the other one is determining whether it's...
Yeah, there's this idea of aggressor networks where you have the one network that you're trying to train, and you have a separate aggressor network that's trying to throw at erroneous data and to get the other network to be better at it. But again, that's all in a single training system, and once I've trained the training network, I then deploy it in the field, and if I encounter a piece of data that my aggressor network hadn't developed before, then I get into trouble and I got to go back to the lab and basically start from scratch again with some new data.
Okay, so
yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, the data sets are getting larger, the networks are getting deeper, they're getting much more intelligent and much better, but you don't have infinite data, and every day as a human being we encounter something new, and it's based upon everything that we've learned before that determines how do we deal with this new encounter, right? And that's continuous learning. And right now, the networks are brittle in that they have difficulty when that happens, and then you go back and train it. So we get better. You know, it ultimately goes to, you know, one of the other questions we have, which is, at what point do you trust it implicitly, right? You know, do you trust the driving car implicitly, and that, you know, it's never going to be fallible? The reality is that they're probably going to be better than humans. Humans are incredibly fallible and pretty bad drivers. And so you get all autonomous cars and the number of accidents will go down, but you'll still have them.
Right. Of course, we're all willing to jump into an Uber with a driver we've never met before and let them.
That's right. I may be dating myself, but before they always said never accept rides from strangers. Now you're encouraged to call strangers to come pick you up.
Yeah, someday we'll be saying the same thing about AI, hopefully. Okay, Sheamus, we're going to go through one last, let's call it programmed question, and then we're going to open things up to the audience to ask you guys questions. But the last programmed question that I posed to you first is, if you had to pick an opportunity related to AI that you think is the biggest opportunity not yet addressed, you thought you'd like to share?
I don't have a specific opportunity. You know, as a startup guy, I'm working on a few of those myself. And sometimes they come to fruition, sometimes not. So I don't want to give anyone any bad advice,
yeah,
but
I thought you might be a little
I think there's
circumspect.
tremendous opportunity out there, and two in particular I'm kind of excited about without being too hand-wavy about it. It's more of like, you know, what can this do for us now? And what can people kind of start to apply for. But one is, you know, especially as a technologist, and it doesn't matter if you're a technologist or you're in business for yourself or you're in a company, but voice AI. So we've seen, you know, between Google Home and Alexa, this explosion in voice AI. Like you tell it a wake word like, okay, Google, or Alexa, play me classical music, tell me the weather. All of a sudden you have this great new user interface that was never available before. Because think about how we interface. It's touch, it's typing, that stuff. All of a sudden, voice AI opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. And to be honest, you know, I don't care, you know, what industry you're in. If you're in the auto industry, you're in the healthcare industry, you're in any industry, take what you're currently doing now and say, how would voice AI kind of enhance that? And it's actually not that difficult to go there, because, you know, you can kind of see, you know, I have a 6-year-old daughter with a slight bit of a speech impediment. I've got an accent. I plug this thing in, and it's understood both of us. And I won't mention their technology, but it was leaps and bounds above when I plug in Google Home, for example. Alexa's also very good. Siri's getting very good. There are APIs into this stuff. There's other platforms out there for doing that. So I think voice AI is extremely exciting. A lot can be done there by just marrying existing technologies. And then the other component of that is, which is somewhat related, is facial recognition. So I see lots of demos from companies where, you know, you're looking at an ad, you know, your facial expression changes, your eyebrows lift, you smile, the ad goes to widescreen, it plays for longer, you frown, plays you a different ad. You know, voice recognition control. I know obviously there's, you know, big surveillance implications for all that kind of stuff, but facial recognition, especially if you're in advertising, if you're in marketing, if you're in any kind of product that has a user interface with facial recognition, can really kind of help as well. So yeah, again, as a business person, as a technologist, I'm really excited about these new user interfaces that are going to basically really change the landscape out there. And then I think lastly, even though it's not my field, but you can kind of see where IoT is exploding. And IoT is is an interesting one. It's a hardware play, it's a software play, but it's also an AI play, right? So IoT generally is collecting data. It's, you know, there's some hardware device, but whatever it is, your IoT thing is, whether it's your fridge, your microwave, your home, your car, integrating all that with AI is going to, there's exciting opportunities there. So just a couple that come to mind and I see people having success with. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I appreciate it. Who's next? JT?
Yep.
I think you're next.
So maybe to continue where Sheamus was going, I believe public safety, if you were to look at an opportunity to maybe better some of the security in various places with some of the unfortunate situations that are happening. Obviously, healthcare is another big one that Sheamus already touched on, I believe, that are just briefly touched on that could have incredible opportunities and impact in the world out there. So I think the combination of these two from a market or industry opportunity should be seriously looked at or more urgently looked at by some of these organizations, being the government, the cities, and all of these initiatives around smart cities that touches, as Sheamus said, on IoT and the enormous amount of analytics that needs to be done. So a lot of good things could really come out of it by bringing and breaking the silos of all this big data architecture and leverage AI to provide heavy compute and make some sense of this much more rapidly than probably any human being could do it. So I think those are great opportunity. Specific to AI, I'd say maybe the opportunity to enhance is, and I believe it was Toby that mentioned emotions, making sense of things, right? So the syntax of contextual information and being able to kind of decode some of that more like a human, right? So I don't want to say more human simulations, but being able to continue to enhance those platforms. So I'd say from an industry point of view, public safety, healthcare, two massive opportunity. Many would say education as well. There's a lot of trials that are ongoing to provide a lot of assistance in the education market. But as many of you guys said, we could go on for hours on this topic. But as I said, last in AI, I think understanding emotions and more of the intelligence that a human may bring, and then being able to or try to simulate that even more closer.
Great. Thank you, JT. Toby, if you're still talking to me, we'd like to hear your thoughts on opportunities that you think have the most potential. Maybe I drove him off. Bob, are you there?
He's on mute. I think he's on mute.
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me now?
Toby?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, perfect.
So I was going to have said healthcare, but I think there's already been significant investment and play in healthcare already. So I'm going to pick up on that idea of education. I think there's a huge opportunity for education. We've seen things like MOOCs take off, but really people haven't yet begun to explore how to use the data you collect in a MOOC to personalize the learning experience and to understand how people learn and how different people learn. And of course, it goes back to one of the questions we started at the beginning of, which was talking about how people are going to be re-educated for the new jobs that turn up. So it is part of the solution. So I think there's a huge, great opportunity to actually use AI for the benefit of mankind in educating us to keep ahead of the machines, and to make that education highly personal, so that the machine knows everything that we know, everything that we don't know, knows how we learn. And follows us, possibly for our whole lives.
Yeah, I
we've
think that's a
only
really good point.
Scratch the surface with MOOCs. I've been surprised and somewhat disappointed how little people use the data that comes from MOOCs to actually make it a much better learning experience than the really archaic one we still give students today in the classroom, which is still back in the 19th century. And education has been very slow really to embrace what we can from the technology.
I agree. It's a space that I've been following for 7 or 8 years, and I hope we eventually figure out this way to use data to improve the way individuals learn. That would be terrific. Bob, if you've got a short opportunity, then I'm going to throw it open to a question or two.
I think there's 2 opportunities to touch on the education aspect of it. I think there's personal opportunities for people to learn. AI is kind of one of the first, at least this incarnation, is the first time where it's almost democratized, where you could, if you have essential programming skills, you can spend a weekend and train up your own neural network. It's all available, it's all open source, and so, there is a tremendous opportunity for people to retrain or re-educate into this arena. I think ultimately it's a job creator and not a job killer if you have the motivation and the skill set to go online and learn about how to do this. You can construct something in Python and deploy your own network. The opportunity I see that's kind of revitalizing in my area and my background in semiconductors is the fact that we now have a different compute mode. And it's destroying the traditional von Neumann architecture, and people are going to start deploying these things on the edge to do classification of data. And because you're not going to send all the raw data back to the cloud, but particularly in visual context, it's just too much bandwidth. But having the AI deployed at the edge and doing the classifications and then sending the abstracted data back to another AI in the cloud that's going to do some heavy analysis on the data itself is really an opportunity that it hasn't been exploited yet, but there's a lot of people working on it right now, at least where I live here in Silicon Valley.
And I'm assuming this, you probably make the same recommendation for IoT applications also, right?
Well, in my view, I would we focus more on
abstract at the edge and send the data back.
So places where, there's big corporations and there's big dollars to be had. So in industrial IoT, for example, General Electric, they have this idea of a digital twin where they do a cloud simulation of how a locomotive actually functions. And based on that analysis, they can change the power and performance profile of their locomotive, and they're saving hundreds of millions of dollars in fuel costs by doing this. And the locomotive is streaming the data back in. So I see, at least my personal view, there's a lot of money to be made in the industrial IoT standpoint and the AI aspect of it as opposed to the consumer AI. There'll always be cell phones. You're going to have a smart hub.
Right.
Maybe you want to talk to your washing machine. Maybe you want to talk to your refrigerator. But I think that that's always going to be that fickle consumer aspect of it, as opposed to hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in the industrial space.
Right. Okay. Well, we've had a great discussion, and I think the answers were very, very informative. In fact, I'd say this is probably one of the better panels that I've been fortunate enough to moderate. You guys did a great job, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of the hosts and all that. The only problem is that we've exhausted our allotted time, and we haven't opened it up for questions. So my apologies for my lack of time management, but I think the quality of the responses was really, really excellent. So I'd just like to thank you guys, all 4 of you, for participating and for bringing many interesting different perspectives to the issues. So thank you, John.
Everyone.
Be well. I'm out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
I know.
Take care.